Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Business Growth Show, where we talk about all components of business and how to utilize them for exponential growth. My name is Ahin Cassiotis. I'm a serial entrepreneur, international speaker, results strategist, business coach, mentor, and consultant. Today, I have an awesome guest. He is a serial entrepreneur and repeat startup founder. He has founded 4 companies, each on the forefront of a major technology wave, including open source software, the smartphone, cloud computing, and now machine learning. He is currently the co-founder and CEO at Nami ML, where he helps app developers start and grow mobile subscription businesses. Welcome, Dan Burcaw, and thank you for being on my show.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, mate. I know it's going to be an amazing show today with heaps of value for everyone watching and listening today. So you're a very successful entrepreneur. So for those people who don't know who you are, please introduce yourself by telling us about you and your journey.
Well, you made it sound pretty exciting. I got my start in the sort of early, Web 1.0, really even before the tech, the first internet boom. And basically where my career started was I just was self-taught in computers, and I'm sure a lot of people have that story. Couldn't kind of keep my hands off them and just taught myself skills. And, I talk about the 4 companies because those are the 4 kind of key companies that I've done in my career, but really, from little web design businesses to, system administration and other things. I mean, I've probably done many more companies that just were kind of short in their duration, but it was all in a kind of a passion of just open doors, just sort of opening around the skills that I had been developing. So, the first one in open source was all about the fact that I had self-taught myself Unix and Linux, and that led to some commercial opportunities built around this open source software. And we can dig into each of these in more detail as we need to, but where that kind of led was in 2008, the launch of the iPhone the year before and the App Store. And I really saw some of the things that I had learned about deploying open source onto devices that were constrained in memory and CPU and other things. Were really that experience from the past really applied to what was going to happen on the smartphone. Apps on the smartphone in 2008 on the App Store, they were really basic at that time, and in part, that first iPhone just had edge networking. So the connectivity wasn't very good. There wasn't a lot of memory on the device. The potential was enormous. And so that led me to found an agency built around designing and developing some, what ended up being some of the world-class apps for sport, large major sports leagues, entertainment companies, really some of the largest brands on the App Store. From there, I built a SaaS company, also in mobile. One of the things that was happening as mobile was sort of maturing with the smartphone was every year Apple and then later Google was adding new capabilities to what developers could do. So a few years in, they added something called push notifications, which are now prolific. And in those early days, there was no infrastructure, there was no cloud service that would help an app developer implement push notifications. So you had to roll it yourself, which was a lot of work. And what you as an app developer wanted to focus on was just building your app. You didn't want to worry about these third-party operating a server and having to deal with the kind of nuances of sending push notifications. And so as part of that experience, we were able to, those 2 companies I exited, both the publicly traded companies, Push.io, the push service, we exited to Oracle. And where Nami really came from, the current company, is that we spent a few years inside of the Oracle Marketing Cloud doing mobile marketing. And one of the observations was, there was actually a couple observations, but one of which was that, there's these really sophisticated marketing tools out in the world, but in a lot of ways they're designed for the commerce of the past. And I really mean sort of like one-time purchases or really traditional commerce. You buy a good, it gets delivered to your house, or, and I don't mean that all of those models are going to be replaced, but there's other ways that people are monetizing. And as we saw the app ecosystem start to move towards subscriptions, we kind of asked ourselves the question, well, why aren't there systems that help app developers more effectively market not an e-commerce product, but a subscription-based product. And there's a lot of challenges around subscriptions that we can get into, but that was one of the origin moments for why we wanted to start Nami. And what Nami is really fundamentally now, and what we're focused on is subscription businesses have great potential, right? Recurring revenue, everybody loves that. So the notion of subscriptions is great from the business perspective. It's even, I would argue, a win-win for customers because not everybody's right for every subscription, but it's a great way to match somebody that has a need for your product and make it accessible to them. So a classic example is Adobe Photoshop. In the old days, you spent $1,000 to get Adobe Photoshop. And if you're a university student or somebody just starting out in design, you might not be able to get a hold of Adobe Photoshop because that was a big sticker shock. Or maybe you'd have to use it only at the lab computer at school, or so on. So it wasn't as accessible. Now that you can access it through a subscription model, more and more people can get access to tools like Adobe Photoshop. And there's from consumer and on mobile first, desktop applications, there's to B2B SaaS software. I mean, really subscriptions are everywhere. And the problem that exists is there's just an immense amount of friction around operating subscription businesses. So there's friction if you want to change your packaging and your marketing around your subscription. There's a ton of friction around support. So how do you support your subscriber base? There's a ton of friction around the sort of engineering elements of just adopting that billing model to begin with. And there's a ton of pain and kind of friction around you're the product owner and you want to be able to kind of, try different levers and experiment and iterate on your subscription business. And how do you do that? There's a lot of friction. So what we're trying to do is just eliminate all that and help people take advantage of the business model they want, but do it in a way where they're really getting leverage for their entire through the roles in their organization, instead of kind of constantly fighting these battles because there's roadblocks.
Yeah, amazing story there, and so many different things that you've done, and with Apple stuff, and obviously with Oracle, massive company, around the world and stuff like that have still are doing a lot of things, and now with what you're doing with apps and subscriptions, definitely awesome. And I think let's go a little bit further back, Rob, because I think you've got a great journey in what you do, and just to get everyone's, let everyone know a bit about how early you started. Like at the young age of 17, right? You wrote code that ended up on a submarine. Like not many people do that. So do you want to let us know at that early stage, how did that come about, and how did you actually get into that sort of area?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, it's sort of, it's a fun part of the story, but it's still sort of shocking all these years later that was something that happened. But I mentioned earlier, kind of learning in the early internet and Unix and Linux and kind of building these technical skills. That first company around open source, what we were actually doing was taking a version of Linux, and we were deploying it, strangely enough, onto Macintosh computers. And this is in the kind of 98 to kind of 2004 timeframe, approximately. And at that time, Apple had not shipped OS 10 yet. So Steve Jobs had just returned to Apple, trying to really build the company back. And one of the problems they faced as a company was that they didn't have a modern operating system. The Mac OS was sort of long in the tooth. Windows had 95 and NT. And NT in particular was really starting to create this kind of IT category. So people were running NT for servers, and that was powering kind of the early internet. Except for this little upstart operating system, Linux. So what happened was my company, what didn't start out as a company, it started out as just a project. We took open source Linux and we ported it to the Apple Macintosh hardware. And what it did was it allowed Apple to sell hardware into organizations that wanted kind of a modern operating system, but couldn't wait for Mac OS 10. Because Apple had already announced their plans for Mac OS 10. It's why they brought Steve Jobs back and bought his company Next. but it wasn't ready for prime time. So our solution was sort of a stopgap that allowed the sales team at Apple to go sell boxes really into government agencies and into different groups within the sort of the US military branches and so on. And so one of those opportunities was with the US Navy and a defense contractor, Lockheed Martin. And what they were trying to do was deploy a off the shelf, meaning hardware you could just go buy from, a catalog really, or internet web page, buy as much of that hardware as they could for the budget that they had to construct these parallel computers. So they'd buy, say, 12 computers, string them together into a cluster. Why do you want to do that? Well, you want to do that because you were able to buy those 12 computers for less money than going out and buying a supercomputer. So on these Navy submarines, what they were doing was they were faced with all the sonar data coming in to the ship, where they're trying to understand what's going on out there around the ship. And that sonar data, to process it, was incredibly expensive from a computing perspective. And what they needed to be able to do was run their algorithm as fast as possible. So every few years, they found the least expensive, most powerful hardware they could find off the shelf. It needed to be able to run Linux, it needed to be able to run open source software, it needed to be able to be strung together into this kind of grid computer, and it needed to be able to run these algorithms around sonar. And so that's what we enabled for the Navy and for Lockheed Martin. And my part of it was that, first of all, the operating system, I was the CTO, and so I was responsible for all of the technology of this. But a lot of it was open source. But then we had to write a lot of custom software to adapt to unique constraints on a submarine. For example, just a standard piece of hardware from Apple didn't fit in the rack mount on the ship. So they had to be modified. But once we modified the hardware, then certain things about the software didn't work the way they were supposed to. So we had to write basically patch code that would allow the system to kind of think it was normal when it had been kind of adapted quite a lot. And then there's all these things around serviceability. So, if something goes wrong on the ship, they're out at sea. They can't just go and, call IT down to fix the problem. So these machines had to if one machine had a problem, it needed to be able to go ask any other machine in the ship to kind of to rebuild itself. And so they could kind of self-heal. And so that was the part of the code that I wrote back when I was still in high school.
Yeah. Awesome story there, and amazing innovation, I guess, how you worked with them and then, tailored and everything like that. And like, I still remember I learned off Windows 3.1 when I was very young, even before Windows 95 with the blue screen, and then it moved forward. And then there was that little battle happening, I guess, with Apple and everything like that. And Linux, for everyone, is the open source software. That was, the guys that were sort of competing in their own way with everyone, that allowed people like yourself to do what you did, which is awesome. And I guess let's talk more about Apple now, because obviously that, you had a big part in Apple. You were centered, your life around that a lot in that ecosystem, let's call it, because they are a very big ecosystem. So what can you share a little bit more about that journey, or anything about Steve Jobs as well?
Yeah. So after doing that company, I needed a break. First of all, I wanted to complete my university degree. So that was important. But also, writing code at that kind of level when, I was just basically a kid with some skills. I didn't know where I stacked up with other people and where my skills better were. I just knew that I was doing this crazy project. And there was other things that we did. I mean, we had a part in some of the Mars rovers and some other stuff like that. So I really was needing kind of a little bit of a break from technology. So when I was at university, I intentionally, did some CS work and a CS minor, but really focused on business because I just wanted to have that other perspective. And so coming out of graduation, what I did was I knew I wanted to go work for Apple, but I didn't want to do it in an engineering capacity. So Apple Retail had just started. I was able to get a position kind kind of on the corporate side of retail, responsible for operations and some things around the growth for kind of a region of the U.S. So it was an interesting perspective because you would think that retail was just an appendage on what is a very product-focused company. But the thing that I learned even back then was that everything at Apple is a product. So, for example, one of the stories that from that time period was that there was always new stores being opened, and everyone, the design team wanted them to have something unique, right? So everyone wasn't a cookie cutter of the rest, and it's even more so that way today. But so part of what that meant was they would try to blend in with the local environment. And so one of the stores that was coming was going to be in Hawaii, and the design team of the store wanted to try to use some local materials for the storefront. So local stones, lava stone that was kind of from the island. So it had a really kind of local and authentic feel. And so, where Apple has now the big campus, the new mothership, and then they had their kind of main infinite loop campus. But what a lot of people don't know if they've not been in that area is that basically every building, every piece of real estate in Cupertino is probably an Apple office. Either past, present, or future, Apple has somehow been part of that. So there was this kind of off-campus campus that was where a lot of the retail development happened. And there's things like a mock store, kind of a whole physical store that's to scale, where they would experiment with all sorts of new things. So there's one story is that, and one day I'm at this offsite location where a lot of the retail work happens, and there's these buildings don't look particularly special, but the way it kind of works is like you can kind of park. You go in and you kind of can park behind the buildings and kind of come in the back, if that makes sense. Main roads on the front, you can kind of go behind and kind of park in the back. So if you're in the back and that's the way you're coming into these buildings, it's not really a part of the landscape that like most people just driving by would ever see. So it's kind of secluded, if that makes sense. And so one time on the back of one of these buildings, there's these just kind of squares, of different, what come to find out, they're different materials, different stones, different ceramics, different materials that look all very different. And so the question is like, what is that? Why is that there? And so come to find out, that was there because Steve Jobs, before making the decision, and this is his level of detail, he was involved in what stone they would use for one specific Apple store location that was opening up. It wasn't even going to be the most, massive location in the world, not the most signature location, right? But still important because it was a reflection of Apple. And so what he wanted to do was come by that, look at all that stone, and some of it looked very similar. Like from the naked eye, you couldn't even tell it was a different material. But he wanted to come by at night and see how it looked under moonlight to be able to make the decision, because it's not good enough to make the decision in broad daylight. You want to also see how it looks at night. So, and that's just one of many stories around how the attention to detail and how everything at Apple is a product. It's not just the iPod or the iPhone or the Mac. It's really everything Apple does is treated like a product.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And yes, I have heard, how Steve was very meticulous and everything like that. And, it was a genius in a lot of ways, but was a bit, interesting to get along with sometimes as well. So amazing story there of a bit of the back end of Apple, which I'm sure not many of us would know. And I guess let's move on now to apps, right? So, you've been involved in apps from the start, right? So, and obviously, like you mentioned a little bit before, that were, very sort of, smaller, I guess, and everything like that with what the capability was of the hardware along with the apps. And now, that's, back in 2008. And now it's evolved a lot now in what happens apps. So, what do you see as changed and everything like that, over that time?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of like two competing axes, I think. One is that in a lot of ways, it's more accessible than it's ever been. And so what I mean by that is when we were just starting out, it was the technology we would use to build these iPhone apps was called Objective-C, kind of this quirky flavor of programming that came from Next, which was Steve's company that was bought to kind of be the origin for Mac OS X and brought him back to Apple. And not very many people on the planet knew Objective-C. And it's part of why I started the agency, because I knew that, hey, if companies are going to build these apps, they're not going to have this talent in-house. But fast forward, and now we have things like Swift, which is their new modern programming language. I say new, but it's now, multiple years old. And then they built on top of that something called Swift UI. And each one of these things has made it more and more accessible. So now somebody that isn't a programmer with 20 years of experience doing assembly code or C, maybe has experience doing JavaScript and more of a scripting kind of approach to programming, can access app development in a way that in 2008 was not as accessible. So that's the kind of the easy access, way more accessible for folks that are just not as hardcore developers. I don't mean hardcore developers, but maybe not as much kind of traditional computer programmers. Okay, but then the other thing that's happened is that we don't just have the iPhone. We've got the Apple Watch. We've got Mac. The Mac OS now has an app store. There's Apple TV. There's whatever devices are coming next, and so now the ecosystem around what started out as a technology software development kit to build apps for a phone now lets you target things way beyond the phone. And so what that creates is this easy access, but then a complexity access, because it's way more difficult. Even if you can more easily write the code, well, now you have to design screens that look good on a phone, look good on a tablet, look good on a watch, look good on a television set, if you want to deploy to all those different form factors. So it's more work today, even though it's easier, if that makes sense. It's a real kind of weird push and pull.
Yeah, very interesting. And it's amazing how it's changed over time, right? Like obviously, the iPhones and the smartphones, really changed it in the way that we could have it on there. But now having all these other metrics and things like that, it's really becoming part of our lives and everything, which is really awesome. And you've been around so much, right? Like from working on, Linux open source to doing other different products to working, within Apple and, creating those initial things, and then even working a lot more in Apple. You've worked on a lot of different products. So like we discussed, Apple's like a big ecosystem, right? Once you sort of get it, and you sort of get all the different ones. Do you have, I guess, are you in that ecosystem, or do you have certain favorites in terms of products and stuff that you use in your day life?
Well, certainly the phone has become a game changer, but I actually, things like the AirPods, the wearables, the Apple Watch, when it first came out, people were like, I'm not sure, is that going to be a huge market? Do I really want to watch this? Wear this watch every day? Before Apple Watch, I didn't wear a watch. Now I wear a watch every day. So that's an interesting. So it's hard to say there's favorites, but it really is part of that ecosystem. And once you get drawn in, we recently got, we have a newborn at home. And so we have this situation where, at night when we need to wake up in the middle of the night in our bedroom, the light switch is not if you're holding a child, you can't just reach and turn on the lights. We're like, oh man, we should get one of those smart light bulbs and be able to control it with a little dimmer remote or even our phone or our watch or something like that. Let's do a smart bulb in the bedroom so we can do this more quickly when we're one-handed and the whole crazy thing. And so then, now this world of home automation has sort of been opened. I knew that those capabilities existed, but before this kind of life event, I never had a reason to have a smart light bulb. So it's interesting about these ecosystems and how it just sort of, in some ways, makes life better, easier, more exciting, or enjoyable. But in some ways it adds complexity, because now I have to worry about, like, is the light bulb on my wireless network? And what, if it's not, why isn't it? And why am I troubleshooting the light bulb? I mean, this is weird. So, there's pros and cons. There's different ecosystems, of course. I'm in the Apple ecosystem because, as you mentioned, it's just been a central part of my career. It's not to say that for example, Google or the Amazon ecosystems don't have lots of good strengths and reasons to be in those ecosystems. But more and more, I mean, it's amazing how much one can do inside of these things. And I would say that same lesson actually extends to entrepreneurship. I'm on my fourth kind of rodeo, and the just like tools out there in the universe now that you can build your company or your vision on top of. In the old days with the Linux company, I mean, if we wanted to sell our piece of software on our website, we had to build the shopping cart ourselves. There was no off-the-shelf code. We had to be dealing with banking APIs and tax rates and crazy stuff. Nowadays, if you want to sell a piece of software, I mean, you just get Stripe or get something like that, and it deals with tax for you. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, interesting about the light bulb. I didn't know about that one. And challenging with the newborn, like you said. Now I can imagine I got any myself, but to having a startup and a business that you're growing with children is its own challenges as well. But it seems like you're doing well. But it is a team effort where possible. So I'm sure you're leveraging your partner a lot and helping each other out where you can, which is awesome. And I guess let's move on through to what you're currently working on, right? So Nami, you're changing the game and everything like that. So tell us more about Nami and everything there.
So the origin story, and we'll get to, you mentioned in the tee-up that, the fourth wave is machine learning. So I want to make sure I touch on that. But an interesting entrepreneurial lesson, I suppose, is that, machine learning isn't a product, right? You have to build a product that can be sort of, if you start with machine learning, you figure out pretty quickly that nobody wants to buy machine learning. They want to buy a product, or they want to buy a solution. And if it happens to be better because of machine learning, then that could be an advantage. So I mentioned that we were at Oracle, saw kind of this move to subscriptions, saw some other trends as well, privacy, right? We were inside this marketing system, and these marketing and ad systems have been pretty lousy when it comes to a kind of an end user privacy perspective, collecting a lot of data. Some of the data is useful, some of it's not, but it's sitting there anyway. And so my co-founder and I, we were kind of thinking about, if we're going to build this next generation system to help people really reduce all the friction around subscriptions, adopting subscription-based models, and we do it in a way where we can be kind of guardians of end user privacy. Is that even possible? So we kind of had to ask ourselves that question. And by the way, if it was possible, that was something we were super excited about, because it felt like, as end users ourselves, this would be the kind of vendor solution we would want our favorite apps to be using, so that, our privacy was protected. So subscriptions, privacy, third sort of trend is machine learning, but not just machine learning, but machine learning on device. And so what does that mean, right? With the iPhone 10 plus generation of devices, where it scans your face and unlocks the phone, right? That is being done not by sending your face up to the cloud somewhere and then to get an answer. Yep, that's Dan, unlock the phone. All of that processing is happening on the phone using on-device machine learning. So what's really great about that is it's a very fast experience. I just look at the phone, boom, it's unlocked. But also, Apple doesn't have all my kind of features of my face sitting in their servers somewhere. So on-device machine learning is a game changer. It's only possible kind of within the last few years because the chips in these devices, starting with the iPhone, but other devices now have this as well. These chips have special microprocessors or kind of co-processors, kind of like how a computer has both a CPU for compute and a GPU for graphics. Well, now in addition, these smartphones and other devices have a ML accelerator in addition to CPU, GPU, to run these algorithms on the device very, very fast. This is being used for all sorts of other things, like to help you take a better photo that looks just awesome. So when you post it to Instagram or wherever you post your photos, hardly anymore you have to do much editing, because a lot of times these algorithms are kind of editing for you as you're taking the picture. So it optimizes for low light. It helps sharpen the image. All that's been doing with on-device algorithms. So when we got started with Nami, the original thesis was, let's help app developers make more money. Simple as that. And one of the ways we wanted to do that was help them adopt subscriptions, because in the app economy in particular, there's been a real race to the bottom on price, these 99-cent downloads. No app developer, especially small app developer, can build a sustainable business on 99-cent downloads when your whole kind of traffic, if you will, it's not a website, but your traffic pattern is really built around, are you featured by Apple? Did you get some press? And so you might get a burst of sales, of one-time sales. That's not recurring. Yeah, so you have to get featured again in order to get another boost. So it seemed to us the subscriptions were a great way to help app developers make more money. Why is that important? So they can keep building those apps, keep investing in those apps. There's so many titles that we saw and were great apps that we loved using a few years ago that aren't on the store anymore because the developers couldn't make it work. They couldn't make it sustainable. So they abandoned it. So maybe it's never been updated, or they even removed it. So that was the origin. How do we help app developers make more money? Then we thought, well, is there a role for machine learning, and specifically on-device machine learning, in service of this mission of helping app developers make more money? And we were informed a little bit by our work doing push notifications and email marketing inside of the Oracle Marketing Cloud, because what a lot of our customers would do if it was getting towards the end of the quarter and they wanted to hit their numbers for the quarter, is they would just send more emails or send more push notifications. And we're all users too, and I'm sure we all you're used to getting emails that you didn't necessarily ask for, or maybe you asked for or opted in at some point, but they've abused that right by kind of hammering you way too much about whatever they're marketing. And the same is true with push notifications, maybe even worse these days because it's on your phone, and so it feels invasive if it's something you didn't specifically opt into. So what we thought is, I wonder if we could give app developers another tool in their kind of marketing toolbox because the other thing is a lot of these experiences are freemium. So you can download the app for free. There's some basic functionality, but if you want the premium functionality, then that's the time to buy the subscription. And again, like I said earlier, not every premium set of features is right for every user. Some users will download an app and they'll be just fine with the free functionality, and that's okay. So what we're trying to do is with the machine learning is help app developers identify kind of automatically using these on-device algorithms who amongst your free users are likely to be good candidates for the premium functionality. And you can automatically identify those users. And then what do you do with that? Well, let's prompt them with an offer to subscribe that has marketing language and attractive marketing and pricing, so that they might want to take you up on the offer to subscribe. And oh, by the way, if they decline the offer, because it's machine learning, we learn from that feedback loop and we can improve our model. So the next time we're looking at a user on the device, we can say, oh, well, this user looked like that last user that the last version of our model said, oh, this user would be likely to purchase. Let's prompt them the offer, but they declined. But we retrained the model, and now this user isn't going to get prompted with the offer because they're exhibiting a pattern that we thought was a likely purchaser, but actually isn't. And so that's just a long-winded way of saying there's a lot we can do on device that a lot of traditional marketing systems have been able to do in the cloud. But if you do some of these things in the cloud, kind of building these cohorts, what you lose the ability to do is do it in a way that guards end user privacy. And the other thing is you're not able to do it instantaneously. So one of the things about Face ID that's magical is you just swipe and unlock your phone and you're done. Boom, you're in. If I want to market to a likely purchaser before Nami, what you would do was you would send all this data up to the cloud. They'd leave your app and go into some other app because you're not doing this processing fast enough. And so what you'd end up with is a list of people to send an email to. So here's the likely purchaser email that you're going to send out. And they're long gone. They've left your experience and gone somewhere else. Now they might come back, but the point was, in the moment that they were in your experience, you lost that moment, that opportunity to convert them because you were processing in the cloud.
Yeah, really amazing points there. And I really love the privacy piece because, a lot of people may have seen the social dilemma, right? And it's pretty crazy with data, how much data the big companies have of us. And that's like, it's a resource, right? Where they're using that to retarget and it's all there. And so I really love what you guys are doing. It's like, hey, let's not, get this data away. Let's use it, on the device, and let's get you, use that machine learning to work out the patterns, like you said, and then make it happen so you can put the offer at the right time, which is massive.
Yeah.
For, for people, because you don't have to try and sell it or try, it's not based on, trying things. It's actually based on facts, right? Based on numbers, and you can predict that stuff. And then obviously with machine learning, it learns, right? So if something doesn't happen, then it will go, okay, what was the reason? And then it gets better over time, right? Those types of things, which is really awesome. And I guess, the subscription model, like you've mentioned, is advantageous because of reoccurring revenue and stuff like that. But some people, like the instant gratification, let's call it, in the society that we are of, let's just get one-time fees, get the money now because we don't know how long they're going to be in us for and stuff like that. So there's that element. Then there's like pricing, like, how much do you put for this subscription model and all that type of stuff. So, obviously you're working with a lot of these businesses now that do these subscription models. So what challenges do you see that they're facing, and what they have to do to ensure that they, are successful?
Yeah, I mean, the number one problem that we are solving and that they face, which is why we're solving it, is that they just can't move fast enough. So you mentioned pricing, for example, what pricing levels to introduce. One of our first prospect conversations, going back several years ago now, that turned into a customer was a very large company in the kind of entertainment space. And they had a pretty large subscription business operating at a nice scale. And something happened where one of the executives had an idea to introduce a new price point. And the new price point would unlock a slightly different set of functionality for the user than the old price point. They were going to keep the old price point, but it was just kind of a extension to sort of see if there is an opportunity to get a different sliver of their audience to move from free to paid by offering this new price point. So, this request from this executive doesn't sound crazy. Sounds quite reasonable. They had probably had some supporting data to say, oh yeah, we think that this subset of our users would go for it. And so they decided to embark on this journey. And this is before they worked with us. 12 months later, more than $1 million invested. They launched this new tier across 14 different platforms. So by that, I mean, phones and tablets and Rokus and, all these kinds of things, 14 different unique instances that had to have this new price point, this new tier. And, come to find out, that big project didn't generate as much revenue as they thought it was going to. In fact, it didn't even get close to paying for itself. And they could have avoided a lot of time if they had had the right infrastructure in place when they built their business originally, or before they introduced the new tier, so that they could just add it. Just one day somebody could just go into the system and say, hey, let's add this, new tier. Here's the price. We want to sell it on the App Store and Google Play and direct on our website and on Roku. And let's drop this software kit from our vendor, Nami. Let's drop it into all of our experiences and do, a few hours of integration in each of those places, and then decide when to go live. And then, and let's spend a lot of time on, the marketing materials to make sure we're, making sure we're communicating the value proposition of this new offer to see. So what they would have been able to do is get to market faster and much much cheaper, much, much cheaper. But also it would have given them the space, kind of the mental space to focus on launching the thing right, going to market with it right, and maybe doing better with it. But because they were bogged down in this kind of engineering exercise across 14 different platforms over the course of 12 months, guess what was left behind? I mean, it wasn't really well marketed because they were so focused on just the technical bits. So that's just one example of how we're just trying to allow people to be way more flexible, way more agile with how they're attacking various problems in their subscription business. Some of the problems around growth, some of the problems are around, preventing churn, some of the problems around just like measurement, right? When you sell on all these different places, how do you have one unified view to know what your revenue is without logging into 14 different systems? Well, it turns out unless you use a solution like Nami, there's no way to do that. You have to log into the App Store, pull those data, put that in your Excel, go into the Google Play, pull in that data, put it in Excel. And some spreadsheet jockey is pulling all that together. You can't do that in real time. So then you're doing it once a week. And then executives don't get the data they want fast enough, right? So those are the kinds of problems that exist that we're solving.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing things. And I love the bit at the end because, so many systems out there that a lot of people are using, and to be able to amalgamate that information and able to be on track, whether it's in dashboards or in actual reports or things like that you can do to make real-time decisions is really powerful. Speed of implementation, speed of information getting it, and then speed to make the decision is everything in business these days. Because and another thing that I say to a lot of people is with strategy, right? You can have the best strategy, but an okay delivery, right? And it's actually not going to go that well. But you can just have a good strategy, but if your delivery is on point in the way that you do it, like you mentioned before, that's going to make all the difference, right? So that getting that right, like you're saying, getting your ducks in a row to make sure that when you hit that button, you're ready to go with everything. And that, that sounds like you guys are really nailing that and helping, all the app developers out there to go, listen, this is the best way to do it. We can help you and make that happen. The other interesting part is that I'm sure many of us, I've heard many stories of people working with companies that have created an app and they don't work correctly, right? They've sit there for a year, longer, who knows, right? And they've got all these issues, and then either they scrap it up to go with someone else, they're trying to fix it, and there's all these issues, right? So from your what you've seen, I guess, in your experience, what should people look out for and expect, when they want to create an app?
Well, first ask the question of why. Why do you want an app to begin with? It's, guess what? It's okay if your business isn't right for an app ecosystem. If your presence is only on the web, let's say, that could be okay, right? Like the dentist office down the street doesn't necessarily need to have an app. Maybe they do if they have some platform that lets them do, scheduling and billing. And yeah, it makes life a little bit easier. But those organizations like that or little businesses shouldn't be investing to build something out custom. They really even shouldn't be doing it, using, trying to cobble something together with templates or open source, I would say, unless if a system that they already have happens to offer a mobile, extension, then that's a totally different story. So the first question is just to ask, is an app right for you? There's an allure to it. I understand, if you, think, if we're just on the, maybe if we're just on the App Store, that's going to be the difference maker. And it's it might be, but just realize, like I said earlier, while some of the technology is way easier now than it was a decade plus ago, it's also a much more complex ecosystem. And not only that, it's a much more competitive ecosystem. So, for any one category of things, there might be a dozen different options. There might be the one or two things that seems to be getting most of the traction on the store. And then there might be another, 8 or 10 kind of clones that aren't getting as much traction, but are still there. And so you just have to really be thoughtful of why you're going to be on the store. The other thing is that, what would have passed years ago for a functional app that maybe didn't have just, a great design aesthetic, doesn't work today. And I think this is actually true outside of the world of apps as well, is that because we have so much more foundational technology to build anything we want, really, websites, mobile apps, streaming services, or, t-shirt shops, or like whatever it is that somebody's going to go and do, there's just more tools. So because of that, much more of the kind of emphasis, in my opinion, needs to be on design and standing out through visual, reaching people's attention, and kind of creating that spark of emotion or kind of emotional connection through your visual identity and visual direction. And so my personal experience is that, finding good designers is tough. There's a lot of designers, there's a lot of people out there that can kind of like open Photoshop and kind of cobble something together. But what separates, that person from somebody that can really crush it, that's affordable, is really tough. So you have to really pick and choose. And, a lot of people can mock up a mobile app, and you see on Dribbble and some of these other sites, Upwork and different places, so all sorts of people with mobile apps in their portfolio. But design isn't also just about visual, especially with a phone form factor. A lot of it's how it works, right? The user experience, not the visual design, but they're related. So if somebody doesn't intuitively understand the Apple ecosystem, maybe because they carry an Android phone, they're not going to be very good at designing an Apple app. But they do anyway, and then it's clunky, and then Apple users are like, this feels weird. It feels like this was not made for this phone. And so then they're going to go find something that feels native to the Apple ecosystem. So there's also, related to this, a tendency to want to use a framework that lets you build an app once and deploy it to both the Apple ecosystem and the Google ecosystem, being the two most, dominant. And that's attractive because you think you can save all this money, but there's a lot of hidden costs in that approach, because you're not building native. It's kind of this layer that gets in the way. So there might be some upfront savings, but over time, all of those savings are going to be eliminated with hassle. Ongoing hassle. But then also those things don't really allow you to embrace what makes each platform unique. And it's those little UX patterns, those user experience patterns that make each platform unique. That's what makes your app feel comfortable or fit in to an ecosystem. So my number one advice is, if you're going to be if you've cross that bar that you want to have an app, after asking yourself a hard question of, really, should you? If you've decided, yeah, we're going to, you need to also think long and hard about what ecosystems you need to be in. So you kind of need to know where your customers are, who you're trying to attract. And then you need to do your best job to target those platforms as kind of natively as you can. If you want to really crush it and succeed in those ecosystems and get the attention of Apple so they promote you, get the attention of Google so they promote you. You just try to do this cookie cutter stuff, you might be able to get to market, but you're in for a lot of hassle, and it's probably not going to meet the business objectives that started the whole initiative to do an app in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. So much awesome gold that you just shared there for everyone that's wanting to get into it. So very important. I love that. And like you're a serial entrepreneur, right? Like, you've had a lot of successful exits, right, of companies, which not a lot of people can say that they've done, right? So that's an amazing achievement there. So I guess, what can you share with everyone as some secrets of, some advice, I guess, to be able to ensure that if that's the path you want to go down, that you do it successfully?
It's I'm going to do the best I can with that question, but even having done this 4 times, or I'm in the middle of number 4, you try to learn lessons from the past, but then like other things come up that you've never encountered before. So there's things that you've seen before, and then there's things you've never seen before. And so part of it is like your ability to adapt to a situation, and then figure out, like, how can I just get enough altitude to kind of think as strategically as possible about the matter. Because especially if you're somebody like me that I have technical skills, I have skill. I can, do some design if I need to. I can, go do a sales call. I can, I have a lot of ability to do stuff, but that doesn't mean I should be, right? I should be trying to find ways to get leverage from my team members, which, by the way, you can only do if you hire really well, because if you have kind of mediocre people, then you're never going to trust them to take on the really important tasks so that you can elevate and kind of get to that more strategic level of thinking. And that strategic, or I kind of talk about it altitude or strategic, but really kind of what it is, the more I've been thinking about it, in recent time is that it's kind of like you need to be able to have daydreaming. You have to be able to daydream as an entrepreneur to be successful. Because, and what that is it's really the space to problem solve creatively without the pressures of the day, or being in kind of the trenches of firefighting, or kind of worried about, the HR issue or payroll or whatever. Yeah, you're going to have all of those struggles and those things that you have to kind of face. But you have to figure out a way to carve out the space to literally daydream, because it's in that creativity that you can really think about, like, where you are, where you want to go, and how you're going to get there, and do it in a way that allows you to get other people on board. Because, you talk about, I've had this track record of success. And I used to think earlier in my career, it must be that I've got these unique skills. I'm uniquely positioned to be successful in these ways. So I'm working so hard. That's why this is happening. The more I've grown up, is like, no, it's that I had good timing. I had really excellent people. And part of why I had excellent people, especially with startups 2, 3, and 4, was because at the period of time that I worked at Apple, one of the things they taught me was how to interview people and how to hire people. And they're one of the best companies in the world at hiring and retaining great talent. And so, all that's just a long way of saying, like, you need to be able to be kind of creative in a way that's free flowing. Well, how do you do that? What's the best way to carve out that time? In my opinion, the best way is to do one of two things, preferably both. And that is, number one, at least a 30 to 45 minute workout. Because if you get past that kind of initial, this sucks, why am I doing this? I didn't want to do this today, part of the workout, and get into now my mind is just thinking about other things. That's the zone you want to be in. And so that's a nice long run. That's a jumping on the Peloton. That's something like that. Swimming, lots of laps. So the other way, though, is kind of the same but different, maybe more enjoyable for certain people, and that is a nice long shower. And in both of those situations, and sometimes when you combine them, what you end up doing is just thinking about all the things that you should be thinking about, but at a different level than you would be if you're like, oh man, I need to, pay the bill, or I need to do this, and you need to do that. And you're so tactical every day, even if you try not to be, it's just what happens. You get sucked into it.
Yeah, I love that. So many amazing points. And yeah, a lot of the big people that wake up early in the morning, whether it's 4 or 5 a.m., they do work out because it helps, with getting that, clearing your mind and everything like that, like you said. And I do take longer showers, and it's funny, like a lot of people say that your best ideas come in the shower, and it's because, like you said, you give yourself that space, right? And you're just there, you're nothing else. And it's an interesting one, like with me, is that sometimes, like, some people might think, I want to, like, look at audiobooks, for an example, right? Like, they're good for when you're on the go and things like that, whether you're driving or you're doing stuff to, like, get information in. But sometimes, like, I occasionally, it's harder in the shower as well, I guess, because you've got some noise, but it's good to not have anything on while you're in the bathroom, right? Because when you're in there, like you said, you get into those moments, and sometimes, I remember a couple of times I've had to run out and, like, write something down because I don't want to forget this, or I have to keep telling myself it for like 5 minutes until I get out of the shower before my mind goes somewhere else to other awesome ideas. So yeah, really amazing points there. I love giving yourself that space. That's really awesome. And a lot of people, right? Like, we're not self-made a lot of the time, right? Like, we've had to build ourselves over this time. And a lot of the time through that, we've had like coaches and mentors and people like that, to help us along the way in different elements there. So how have people in those sort of elements like helped you to achieve, what you've done in business?
I don't necessarily think that in my personal story, it's been quite as informed by mentors per se. Probably a bit earlier kind of in school, having those teachers that kind of identify that, oh, this kid, needs something and I'm going to help them with this. And not in a remedial fashion, but like, hey, I want to foster this thing with this person. I definitely had some good teachers that kind of took me under their wing. I think so in business, it's slightly different for me, which is that for whatever reason, and this maybe is a form of mentorship, but just a little bit different. For whatever reason, with each of the companies, especially earlier in my career, some of the first customers were folks that for whatever reason were willing to take the chance, right? So there's this great story. So for our app development agency, started it, had the first customer pretty quickly. That customer came because of an existing relationship. So in a way, that wasn't selling to somebody totally blind for the first time, totally, kind of a cold contact. So then we go, I decided, well, Apple has their annual developer conference. I should go to that. It's expensive, but it's, you kind of have to be there if you want to be in this industry. So I go, and then I decide, I really should bring my two developers. And I think I couldn't even afford to pay their whole ticket because it's like, $3,000 for WWDC, I think, or 2,000. But I did them a deal. I said, I'll pay for the hotel, airfare, and then I'll split the ticket, cost of the ticket. And, they wanted to go anyway, right? So it was a way that we could kind of get them there without the company having to like really outlay capital that we didn't have. So an interesting thing happened. One of my developers was in a session, and I didn't go to the session. I was doing something else, had another meeting, was in another session, and he sends me a text, and he's like, hey, I sat next to this guy, and I have a business card I want to give you. I think you should meet with them. It's like, okay. So I go and get the business card. I take one look at it. I see the logo, international recognized brand, right? That we'd be honored to work for. And, I reach out to the guy, and we go have Starbucks next door to Moscone in San Francisco. And we just hit it off. We just immediately hit it off. And that person ended up being essential in both that agency and our push notification business. He and the brand he represented was our number one customer at both for a long time. And it was both through kind of this access to opportunity because my person was there and they just happened to randomly, sat next to this guy. But then when we interacted, he could have gone with some much more established company. We had just gotten going, and but just for some reason he wanted to take the chance. And it wasn't without a little bit of trial. I mean, we had a small project out to have us work on first to see how we did, but even that wasn't necessary. That was still a chance for this recognized brand to kind of, so anyway, that's the lesson I would draw, is just that, mentors or people that take a chance on you come in different forms. And it's not always just that you have that, like, seasoned public CEO that's taking you under their wing to, teach you all the things about business. Sometimes it's just about like doors presenting themselves because other people are choosing to open those doors, not because you're necessarily opening them for yourself. Although I guess we would have never had that opportunity had we not found a way to go to San Francisco. But
yeah, That's awesome. And I think, to wrap that all up is that, opportunities are there, right? They're everywhere, and you got to be able to see them and to capitalize on them, right? To make the most of them. And it's a really amazing story. And that's like pivotal story to you, right? On how you've, used that relationship, to help you with multiple businesses. So that's really amazing. We connected through our networks where I learned about your awesome journey, which started at 17 and then grew to you working in a variety of startups and industries. Nami sounds like an awesome, cutting edge business, which is greatly helping people launch, scale, and optimize their mobile app subscription business. I recommend it to everybody. From what I've heard today, it's like this is going to take you to the next level. So, you're a great guy. I'm sure you're going to continue to innovate and make a meaningful difference in the world. I'm very grateful that we connected, and I look forward to working with you in the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to check out Nami, you had it exactly right. We started especially around kind of mobile apps and mobile app subscriptions because they're particularly brutal from a kind of friction perspective, as we've talked about today. But we're not stopping at mobile. In fact, coming soon, we're extending to web-based products as well. So really any digital product that could make use of a subscription-based business model, you're a candidate for our solution. So our website, just to plug that real fast, is nami.ml. Nami like tsunami, NAMI.ml.
Awesome, mate. Yes, definitely big plug. I'll be checking it out definitely for myself. Not that I have an app at the moment, but web-based, definitely like that. And for everybody else, definitely check out Nami, guys. It's, Dan's done some amazing things in what he's done and who he's worked with Apple and everybody else and stuff. So I'm sure it's going to be cutting edge. And machine learning is one of the big buzzwords that's happening right now. And, when you get that working for you, then, the possibilities, really are endless to create that business, that you're wanting to get that freedom and everything else. So thank you so much for your time today, Dan. It has been amazing, and is there anywhere else? Like obviously Nami ML is in there. Is there anywhere else that people can find you, get in contact with you as well?
Yeah, the easiest way is just LinkedIn. I'm on various social networks. Sometimes I'm more active at times than other times, but the place that I frequent, to especially connect with folks like your audience, is on LinkedIn. So that's a great place to look me up. My name is pretty unique, Burcaw. It's a rare name, so I get that. I guess I've got, there might be a couple other search results, but if you search for me using just my last name, I'm sure you'll find me pretty quickly.
Awesome, mate. I'm all about the unique names as well. It helps us stand out a little bit. So love it. So thank you everyone for watching and listening to this show where we talk about everything on business growth. Please like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube as Ahin Cassiotis, or visit my website, ahincassiotis.com. I completely agree with you, or do I? The only way we know is if you tune in next time. So until next time, remember that our business grows when we learn skills and take action using them in spite of fear. Have a great day.